There's three fundamental areas that we have to talk about. Hello and welcome to the Space Between Ideas. I'm Blaine Gates. Today, I would like to continue to talk about all of the wild and wonderful things about business. When I teach business coaching and when I do the process of business coaching, there's three fundamental areas that we have to talk about. The first part of the process of learning coaching methodologies is the fundamentals. The fundamentals consist of really basic things. I call them game pieces and game flow. You can compare this to things like playing board games like chess or checkers. Perhaps we can start with checkers. So in checkers, what do you have? You have like a board where you have like 10 squares by 10 squares. You have like 100 squares, or maybe it's 8 times 8, probably 8 times 8. So you have 64 squares, but in checkers, then you can only move on half of those squares. And then you can only move in diagonal directions. You can jump over people unless there's two people that are, there's all these rules about the game pieces, and then there's rules about how you can move around the board. I think this is the first place that I always start with new students. We start talking about three basic ideas. Even before we talk about the game pieces, we want to talk about the roles and functions of those pieces. And we can break it down basically into four concepts. The first concept is about making decisions. Making decisions, it breaks down into two different roles. Either you have the executive who has vision, they see where the company is headed, or you have managers. These are the people who control people and resources using infrastructure. And I like to use the analogy of eyes and heart, because the heart pumps blood throughout the system, and the eyes, it helps you to achieve your aim. Now, you're not going to be able to do anything unless you're able to make decisions. And the question is, how are you able to make those decisions? Obviously, you have to use your eyes, you have to use your heart, you have to understand the system, you have to know where you're going. And so the next function is the brain, thinking tools, thinking methodology. And in this area, we have two different roles. One is a coach and another is an analyst. And of course, the secret question is a manager also an analyst and a coach? Well, the thing is that, how do you make a decision unless you consult with the analyst? And how do you implement a decision unless you act as a coach? And so that's why I divide these functions into various roles. Because then you realize that you are simultaneously making decisions, applying thinking models, and also number three. So the third role or function is about following rules or procedures. Once you've made the decision, then you need somebody to implement those decisions. And we can separate those broadly into somebody who's doing the actual service or building the product. We call those technicians. The clerks, they're pushing paperwork, they're processing transactions, they're looking at the legal framework, they're putting in purchase orders, they're dealing with all of the day-to-day items that run the business, that follow already designed best practices, rules, regulations, and directives from managers. And then, of course, you have your librarians who are mainly concerned with managing databases and different types of software and technology. So that's broadly the game pieces. So that's just like chess. You have your king and queen and your knight and your rooks and your bishops and all of your pawns. That's chess. And then you have your game board. You see, once these pieces start crashing into each other, suddenly you start noticing that there are other forces at play, because the rules dictate how people are going to move, and they help you to understand the structure and the philosophy and the strategy of the game. And that's where we come to the idea of game flow. Basically, what I'm trying to teach people in game flow is an idea of plan and act. After we learn the fundamentals, then we move to endeavor cycle. What is this cycle? Basically, it's about planning and acting. Of course, we can break down planning and acting into many, many other things. As we've been talking about recently, at least we can break down a plan into what? Output, input, scenarios, choice. You see, we look at the output, we look at the input, we come up with some scenarios, and then we make a choice. That's the basis behind the endeavor cycle. Now, the endeavor forces are these magical forces, these things that are happening, the concepts that we are basing our strategies upon. And in order to understand the forces at play, then we need to look at each of these things in the endeavor cycle with these lenses, with a microscope. We got to look a little bit closer. For example, we were looking at output and performance. We were talking about processes. And then we were talking about input, two of the lenses that we looked at, the business model canvas and state styles. All right, now we can go in different directions from here. So a couple of people that I was talking to this week, they were really interested in talking about motivation. And when we talk about motivation, then we're going to go into the chapter called State Purposes. Or we can look at actually how people are performing. You see, one is output. Performance, it's about output. And we're talking about how much effort people are putting into their activities and how much skill and knowledge and success they get from those actions. That's output. Or input, which is something about motivation. Why are people doing things? What's pushing them to put in a level of effort? What's helping them to go in and figure out how to solve problems and figure out how to get the job done? What is it that actually gives somebody grit? You know, that last minute push to get something done on time when you're tired, when you're out of motivation, but you want to succeed. So we go from those fundamentals where we looked at roles such as executive and manager and coach and analyst and technician and librarian and clerk. That's the fundamentals. And then we go all the way over to a lens, something like state purposes. And we have something a little bit different. You can imagine things such as a camp counselor, the people who want to get the job done, the output, the person who cares about what we achieve. These are camp counselors. They care about relationships. They care about purpose and meaning. They want to make a change. They want to keep everyone going. They want to have satisfying relationships. They want to improve the fabric of society. Also, we have people that are kind of like our parents, like our mother, who's goal-oriented. They want purpose. They want meaning. They want direction. And we have people like dad, people who are more interested in how much risk can we take on and how much more interesting is it as we increase our risk and how much risk can we accept before it's just too risky. These are people who are planning, making plans. And then we have the intern, people who are interested in improving their understanding and trying to make a name for themselves and building a reputation and improving their wellness and trying to provide resources and knowledge and skills, trying to make a difference in this world. But they have to start from something small. They need to develop. All right, so on one side, we have the roles that you can find that are based on functions, very abstract. And then also you have purposes, but these are also kind of abstract. And the best way that you can figure out if you're enjoying your career, if you're in the right job, is to break down these endeavor forces and understand what's really happening in these business endeavors, and then identify with these concepts, identify with these roles, and identify with these ideas and figure out what you are. And if you can do what you are, then how much happier you will be.